Life has a way of throwing us into seasons we didn't expect. One day, everything feels familiar, comfortable, and predictable. Then suddenly something shifts. A job changes, a friendship ends, a door closes, a move happens. And all at once, we're standing in a place that feels uncertain. It's human nature to resist it. We like control. We like to know what's coming next. But I came to tell you tonight, don't be afraid of change, because God is at work in your life even when you can't see it. So many people wrestle with the idea when change comes, it must mean something is wrong. When the job ends, when the relationship shifts, when the season of life looks different, our first instinct is to say, what did I do wrong? Where did I fail? But I want you to hear me tonight. Change is not punishment. It's preparation. It's not God stripping you away from purpose. It's God positioning you for it. If you only measure God's hand by comfort, you'll miss the times when His greatest work is done through disruption. Comfort zones feel good, but they rarely produce growth. And growth is what God is after. You see, He didn't create you to stay stuck, small, or stagnant. He created you to stretch, to develop, to evolve into the person He already saw in you from the very beginning. So when things start to shake in your life, don't automatically assume it's the enemy. Sometimes it's God Himself disturbing what you thought was permanent so He can bring you into something greater. Think of Joseph in the Bible. Here's a man with dreams of greatness. He saw himself elevated. He saw himself leading. He saw himself chosen. But the road to that promise didn't look like the dream. It looked like betrayal. It looked like being thrown into a pit. It looked like being sold into slavery, falsely accused, and locked up in a prison cell. If Joseph had judged every season by how it felt, he might have assumed God had abandoned him. But what Joseph couldn't see in the pit or in Potiphar's house was that every single change was preparation. Preparation for the palace. That's how God works in your life too. That job you lost, preparation. That friendship that ended, preparation. That door that slammed shut, preparation. God uses changes not to punish you, but to build you, to refine you, to get you ready for where He's about to take you. And here's the truth. Sometimes if God didn't close one door, you'd never walk through the next one. If He didn't allow one season to end, you'd never step into the new season He has prepared. We hold on to things because they feel safe. We cling to relationships because they feel familiar. We stay in situations that no longer fit us because they're comfortable. But God is too invested in your destiny to let you stay trapped in a place that no longer serves His purpose for your life. When God allows change, it's because He knows something you don't. He knows the land you haven't yet seen. He knows the opportunities that haven't yet opened. He knows the growth you haven't yet tapped into. You may see loss, but He sees preparation. You may see disruption, but He sees direction. You may see the ending, but He sees the beginning. Think about it. Jesus Himself experienced this. before stepping fully into his public ministry, he was led into the wilderness for 40 days. The wilderness was a place of change, of stripping, of testing. It was uncomfortable, but it wasn't punishment. It was preparation. Preparation to step into his calling with power, authority, and clarity. And that's what's happening to you. God is preparing you in ways you might not even recognize. He's pulling things out of you that you didn't know you had. He's strengthening your faith, deepening your trust, sharpening your character. And all of it is because he knows you are destined for more. So stop calling your preparation a punishment. Stop labeling your disruption as destruction. It's not the end. It's the beginning of something greater. God is preparing you for rooms you haven't yet entered, for opportunities you haven't yet seen, for blessings you haven't yet held. And when the preparation is complete, you'll look back and realize that everything you thought was working against you was actually working for you. Don't be afraid of change. It's not punishment, it's preparation. So when change comes, it has a way of shaking us. It makes us wonder, am I lost? Did I miss the mark? Did I take the wrong turn? But let me tell you something, you are not lost. You are led. The same God who spoke the stars into the sky is the same God directing the steps of your life. Change doesn't mean abandonment. Change doesn't mean confusion. Change is often the evidence that his hand is at work, guiding you into places you wouldn't have walked into on your own. See, we love to pray for God to order our steps, but we don't always love the path he chooses to take us on. We want the straight road, the easy path, the predictable route. But God doesn't just work in straight lines. Sometimes he takes us through detours, through valleys, through unfamiliar terrain, because it's in those places that his guidance becomes undeniable. You wouldn't even know he was guiding you if every step looked simple and clear. But when change comes, when the scenery shifts and you're no longer on the familiar path, you begin to see his hand steering you in ways that only he can. Think about Abraham. God told him, leave your father's house, your country, and go to a land I will show you. No details, no GPS coordinates, no clear destination, just one instruction: go. That's how God moves sometimes. He doesn't always reveal the whole picture. He simply asks you to trust that his hand is guiding you even when you don't understand. Abraham walked away from what was familiar because he believed that God's hand was better than his own plans. And it was. When change disrupts your life, don't panic. Pay attention. Pay attention to the doors that close, the people that shift, the opportunities that reroute you. That's not chaos, that's guidance. That's God redirecting you from what you thought was best into what he knows is best. He's too wise to make a mistake and too loving to leave you wandering. And I want you to hear this. Guidance doesn't always feel like guidance while you're in it. Sometimes it feels like loss. Sometimes it feels like rejection. Sometimes it feels like confusion. But hindsight will show you that every no was really a divine redirection. Every ending was the birth of a new beginning, and every shift was God's way of steering you closer to his purpose for your life. There are some people under the sound of my voice who've been frustrated with where you are right now. You are asking God, why did you let this happen? Why did you move me here? Why did this change hit my life? What you need to know is that his hand is all over it. He knows where you need to be positioned. He knows the timing. He knows the connections. He knows what lies ahead of you that you cannot yet see. His hand has been guiding you even in the dark. And sometimes he lets you lose control so you can finally discover that you were never in control to begin with. That job you thought you secured on your own, that was his hand. That friend who showed up in the exact season you needed them, that was his hand. That closed door that hurt you but protected you from something you didn't even know was coming, that was his hand. God's hand is steady even when life feels shaky. He's guiding you with precision, aligning every detail, every step, every moment. And here's the part that should give you peace. If his hand is guiding you, you cannot be lost. You may not always know where you are, but he always knows where he's taking you. So the next time change comes knocking, don't see it as a sign that you're alone. See it as proof that his hand is guiding you into something greater. Trust his guidance even when you can't trace his steps, because when God's hand is guiding your life, you don't have to fear the change. You can embrace it, knowing he's leading you exactly where you need to be. Said, change doesn't just move you, it grows you. Change is the gymnasium of your spirit, the place where God develops muscles you didn't even know you had. You see, when life is predictable and comfortable, you don't stretch, you don't dig deep. You don't have to call on God with the same intensity. But when change comes, when everything is shifting and the ground under your feet feels unstable, that's when you discover strength you didn't know was inside you. We often ask God to give us strength, but strength is not delivered like a package on your doorstep. Strength is forged in the fire. Strength is birthed through struggle. Strength is developed when you're forced to adapt, when you're pushed beyond your comfort zone, when you've got no choice but to hold on and push forward. Think about a seed. A seed doesn't grow in comfort. It has to break to be buried in the dark, to press its way through the soil just to reach the light. And yet, all that pressure is necessary. Without the breaking, there's no growth. Without the soil pressing against it, there's no root. Without the fight to push upward, there's no strength in the stem to hold the plant when it blooms. That's what change does in your life. It presses you, it pushes you, it breaks you, but it also builds you. Some of you have been through seasons that left you asking, why do I have to go through all this? But if you look back, you'll realize that the very things that felt like they were destroying you were actually the things that made you who you are. The heartbreak taught you resilience. The setback taught you patience. The disappointment taught you faith. The rejection taught you to rely on God instead of people. Every change has been a classroom, and every lesson has been shaping your character for what's coming next. Don't despise the seasons of pressure. Don't despise the moments when change pushes you out of the familiar. That's when you grow. That's when you learn how to pray with power, how to trust God deeply, how to stand firm even when the wind is blowing hard against you. Change teaches you to bend without breaking. It shows you how to walk by faith and not by sight. It builds a tenacity in you that nothing else can produce. When you look at the people God used mightily in Scripture, you'll see a pattern. Joseph had to go from the pit to Potiphar's house to prison before he could step into the palace. David had to fight lions and bears in the field before he could stand before Goliath. Paul had to endure shipwrecks, beatings, and imprisonment, but it was through those very trials that his faith and his words carried weight. Their strength was not given to them overnight. It was developed through seasons of change, hardship, and pressure. And here's the thing, strength is not just about surviving, it's about preparing. God uses change to prepare you for the doors he's about to open. If he gave you the blessing too soon, you wouldn't have the character to sustain it. If he promoted you before the process, the weight of the assignment would crush you. So he lets you walk through change, not to break you, but to build you up for where he's taking you. You may not see it now, but the very change that feels like it's draining you is actually equipping you. It's putting tools in your hand, wisdom in your mind, and fire in your spirit. You are being shaped, refined, and strengthened for greater. So instead of fearing change, embrace it. Recognize that every shift is working something in you. Every challenge is chiseling away the weakness. Every trial is sharpening your faith. Change is not just happening to you, it's happening for you. And when the dust settles, you'll realize that you're stronger, wiser, and more prepared than you've ever been. Because God doesn't just want to change your situation. He wants to change you in the process. That's why you can stand in the middle of change and declare with confidence, I am not being destroyed, I am being developed. One of the most powerful things about change is that it doesn't just alter your circumstances, it shifts your perspective. You start to see life differently. You start to see yourself differently. And most importantly, you start to see God differently. Because when change comes, it forces you to reevaluate what really matters and where your trust truly lies. You see, as long as everything is stable, as long as the routine is predictable, you can get comfortable seeing life through one lens. You can convince yourself that you've got everything under control. But when change shows up, when the ground begins to move beneath your feet, it forces you to look again. It forces you to adjust your vision. Change will make you ask deeper questions. Change will make you see beyond what's temporary and fix your eyes on what's eternal. Perspective is powerful. The same situation can look like a curse or a blessing, depending on the angle you view it from. The children of Israel looked at the wilderness and saw a death sentence, but God saw it as a training ground. Joseph's brothers saw betrayal, but Joseph saw destiny. Paul could have looked at prison as punishment, but he chose to see it as a pulpit. When your perspective shifts, your pain doesn't change, but your purpose in the pain comes into focus. Sometimes God allows change not because he's trying to take something away from you, but because he's trying to give you a new way of seeing. If you keep looking at life through yesterday's lens, you'll miss the beauty of today's opportunity if you keep measuring your future through the mistakes of your past. You'll limit what God wants to do in your tomorrow. Change forces you to lift your eyes, to shift your vision, to see beyond what's right in front of you. Think about an eagle. An eagle doesn't see like other birds. It soars high above the storm and gains perspective that no sparrow could ever comprehend. That's what change does. It lifts you higher so you can see clearer. You stop focusing on what you lost and start seeing what you gained. You stop obsessing over who walked away and start appreciating who stayed. You stop being consumed by the closed doors and start celebrating the ones that are opening. Many times, it isn't your situation that needs to change, it's your sight. You may be crying over what God removed, not realizing that it was never meant to carry you into your next season. You may be frustrated over delays, not recognizing that God's timing is protecting you from stepping into something too soon. Change isn't just about what happens to you. It's about what happens in you and how you begin to perceive the hand of God working in ways you couldn't see before. And let's be honest, there are some things you couldn't appreciate until you went through change. You couldn't value peace until you lost it. You couldn't recognize strength until you were weak. You couldn't understand joy until you cried some tears. Change has a way of making you grateful for what you used to take for granted. It makes you see the blessings you overlooked when life was easy. God uses change to lift the scales from your eyes. He uses it to bring clarity where there was confusion, to bring vision where there was blindness. Because when your perspective changes, your response changes. You don't react out of fear anymore. You respond with faith. You don't panic when the storm comes. You trust the one who calms it. You don't crumble under pressure. You stand because you've seen God work before and you know he will do it again. So if you're in the middle of change right now, don't just ask God to fix it. Ask him to show you what he wants you to see. Ask him to open your eyes to the lessons, the opportunities, the hidden blessings wrapped inside the change. Because the way you see it will determine the way you move through it. You can't always control what changes, but you can control your perspective. And when your vision lines up with God's, you'll realize that even in the middle of change, you are standing right in the center of his plan. That's why I dare you to lift your head, wipe your tears, and shift your vision. because what looked like the end is really the beginning. One of the greatest reasons God allows change in our lives is because change prepares us for growth. Growth never happens in comfort. Growth doesn't come when everything is predictable, neat, and controlled. Growth comes when you are stretched, when you are pushed, when you are placed in a position that demands more out of you than you thought you had to give. That's the uncomfortable truth of transformation. Without change, you stay the same, but with change, you become everything God created you to be. Every seed has to go through a breaking before it becomes a tree. You don't get fruit without the process of breaking open of change. The shell that once protected the seed can't remain forever. It must split. It must give way. It must change so that the life inside can push through. In the same way, the familiar routines and patterns of your life may feel safe, but if God leaves you there too long, they will stunt your growth. Change is God's way of breaking open what's been limiting you so the life He placed inside you can rise up and flourish. Think about it. Every time you've grown, it was because something shifted. When you learned to walk, you had to leave crawling behind. When you moved into a new level of responsibility, you had to leave childish ways behind. When you stepped into new seasons of life, you had to let go of things that once fit, but no longer served you. Growth requires change, and change requires the willingness to let go. Some of us have been praying for growth, but when God sends change, we fight it. We cry over the doors that close, the people who leave, the opportunities that fade. But what if those very things are the soil God is using to prepare you for your next level? What if the disappointment is simply the stage being set for your development? You can't stay in the same chapter and expect to read the whole story. Change is the turning of the page that leads to growth. And let me tell you something, growth isn't always glamorous. It doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it feels lonely. Sometimes it feels like God has abandoned you. But in reality, He's closer than He's ever been, carefully cultivating your soul, pulling out the weeds, pruning the branches so that you can bear more fruit. You see, a gardener doesn't prune a dead branch. He prunes the ones that are alive because they have the potential to produce even more. That's what change is. It's God pruning you, preparing you, stretching you so that your future can carry more than your past ever did. You may be looking at your life right now and wondering why things are shifting, why you feel unsettled, why doors are closing. Don't despise it. It's preparation. God is preparing you for growth you can't even imagine. He's getting you ready for opportunities that require a stronger version of you, a wiser version of you, a more mature version of you. If He left you where you were, you wouldn't be able to handle what's coming. That's why He allows the change, so you will grow into the capacity He knows you'll need. Growth is not about comfort. It's about capacity. It's about being stretched to carry more love, more wisdom, more vision, more influence. You've been asking God to enlarge your territory, but enlargement comes with stretching. You can't expand without pressure. You can't grow without being uncomfortable. So don't run from the change. Don't resent the change. Don't fight the change. Embrace it because it's preparing you for growth that will take you into places you never thought possible. So if life feels uncomfortable right now, if you feel stretched and pressed on every side, know this: it's not to break you down, it's to build you up. It's not punishment, it's preparation. God is not trying to destroy you, He's trying to develop you, because change may be painful, but growth is priceless. Here's key point 6C. Change reveals God's hand at work, expanded into a 650-word segment that flows in the same style and spirit as the rest of the message. When you really take a step back and look at your life, you'll start to see that change is not random. Change is not chaotic. Change is not just a series of accidents or coincidences. Change is the handwriting of God in motion. It's His way of shifting the puzzle pieces of your life into alignment with His divine purpose. And when you begin to recognize that, when you stop seeing change as the enemy and start seeing it as evidence of God's activity, your whole perspective changes. Because the truth is, every shift, every transition, every door that shuts, and every opportunity that opens is the fingerprint of God on your story. You may not always understand it in the moment. You may cry about it, wrestle with it, question it. But when you look back later, you'll realize that if things hadn't changed when they did, you would have missed what He had waiting for you. Change is not just something happening to you, it is God working for you. Think about Joseph, sold into slavery, thrown into prison, forgotten by the very people he helped. From the outside, it looked like his life was falling apart. But in reality, every change was positioning him closer to the palace. The betrayal, the pit, the prison, those weren't setbacks, they were setups. God was at work in every uncomfortable transition. And when the time was right, Joseph could look back and say, what they meant for evil, God turned for good. That's the beauty of seeing change as God's hand, because what felt like breaking was really building. What felt like loss was really preparation, and what felt like abandonment was really protection. Some of you are in the middle of change right now, and it feels like chaos. But let me tell you, behind the chaos, there is a creator. Behind the confusion, there is a plan. Behind the uncertainty, there is a God who never loses control. The same God who spoke order into the void is the same God orchestrating the shifts in your life. If He can bring beauty out of formlessness, He can bring destiny out of your change. When you begin to trust that change is God's way of moving you forward, your fear turns into faith. Your panic turns into praise. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start declaring, God must be up to something. That's when you shift from surviving change to thriving in it, because you know the one guiding the process. But here's the key: you don't always get to see the whole picture. God rarely gives you the full map. He gives you steps. He says, go here. And when you obey, he says, now turn there. Change is his way of keeping you dependent on him, so you don't trust the plan more than you trust the planner. That's why the Bible says we walk by faith, not by sight. Change keeps you leaning, keeps you listening, keeps you surrendered. And when it's all said and done, change becomes your testimony. You'll be able to stand in front of people and say, I didn't like it at the time, but now I see God's hand was on me all along. If I hadn't lost that job, I wouldn't be standing in this one. If that relationship hadn't ended, I wouldn't have met the right one. If that door hadn't closed, I never would have found the open one. Change becomes the evidence that God was weaving your story, even when you couldn't understand the threads. So don't be afraid of change. Don't run from it. Don't resent it. Change is the visible proof of an invisible God at work in your life. It's his way of reminding you that he is not finished with you yet. Every shift is a signal that heaven is still moving on your behalf. And when you can see God in the change, you won't just endure it, you'll embrace it, because you'll know that every transition is taking you one step closer to the destiny he designed for you before the foundation of the world. Change isn't your enemy. Change is your evidence.